There are moments in life when everything feels stuck. No matter how hard you try, money doesn't stay. Opportunities don't come. Luck feels distant, almost unreachable, and slowly. A question begins to grow inside your mind. Why do some people seem lucky, while others keep struggling? Is it chance? Is it coincidence? Or is there something deeper, something unseen, shaping outcomes behind the scenes? For centuries, ancient traditions have suggested something very different. They believed that luck is not random. It is influenced, shaped, aligned. And one of the most fascinating teachings comes from ancient monastic practices, where simple everyday actions were believed to influence the flow of energy, not through magic, but through alignment of mind, environment, and intention. Because according to these teachings, your outer world is often a reflection of your inner state and the energy you surround yourself with. Now imagine this. What if the space where you sleep, the place where your body rests for hours, is silently influencing your life? Because while you sleep, your conscious mind rests, but your subconscious remains active, absorbing, processing, aligning. Ancient wisdom suggests that certain objects, placed intentionally in specific locations, can subtly influence your subconscious environment. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but quietly, consistently. And over time, that quiet influence begins to shape your mindset, your decisions, and ultimately, your outcomes. Before something appears in your life physically, it often takes form mentally. A thought, an idea, a feeling. Your room, your habits, your environment, even the space beneath where you sleep. This space represents what is hidden beneath you, your foundation. Now, here's where curiosity begins to rise. What exactly are these objects? And how can something so simple influence luck or financial opportunity? To understand that, you need to first understand one fundamental idea. Energy follows attention. Whatever you focus on grows. Your subconscious focus is influenced by symbols, by repetition, by environment. This is why ancient traditions used symbolic objects. Imagine placing an object representing abundance under your bed. Every night, your mind registers it. It becomes part of your internal world. Slowly, your thinking begins to shift from scarcity to possibility, from doubt to expectation. You notice opportunities you previously ignored. You take steps you previously avoided. What looks like luck is actually alignment from within. Ancient teachings emphasized very specific items, each chosen for its symbolic meaning. Because symbolism is the language of the subconscious. Is your environment supporting your goals or silently working against them? Most people never design their environment. They simply live in it. Imagine doing something simple but intentional, placing 3 specific items under your bed with awareness, creating a ripple effect in your subconscious. This is not about superstition. It's about psychology and subtle influence. When your inner world shifts, your outer world follows. Real transformation doesn't begin with what you do. It begins with how you think and how your environment shapes that thinking. What are these 3 objects, and why were they chosen to represent abundance, opportunity, and unexpected fortune? Because once you understand their meaning, you begin to see something powerful, that sometimes the smallest changes create the biggest shifts. Because once you begin to understand that your environment is not neutral, everything starts to look different. You realize that the objects around you are not just objects, they are signals, silent messages, repeated every single day, shaping your internal world without you even noticing. And this is exactly why ancient teachings placed so much importance on symbolism. Not because the object itself had power, but because the mind gives it power. Now let's go deeper into something very important. Your subconscious mind does not respond to logic. It responds to repetition, to emotion, to meaning. That's why a simple symbol, when placed consistently in your environment, can begin to influence how you think, how you feel, and ultimately, how you act. Now imagine placing something under your bed, where you spend hours every night, a space where your conscious mind rests, but your subconscious becomes highly active. This is not just rest, this is programming, because during sleep, your brain is processing everything you experienced, everything you felt, everything you were exposed to. And when certain symbols are consistently present, they become part of that process. Now this is where the first object comes in. Not random, not decorative, chosen with purpose. In many traditional teachings, one of the most powerful symbols of abundance is something simple, yet deeply meaningful. A coin. But not just any coin. A coin that represents value, exchange, flow. Because money, in its simplest form, is energy in motion. It moves, it circulates, it flows from one place to another. And when this flow is blocked, life begins to feel stuck. Now here's the interesting part. When you place a coin under your bed, you are not placing wealth there. You are placing a symbol of flow, and your subconscious begins to associate your foundation, your resting place, with movement and opportunity, instead of stagnation. Now think about this deeply. How many people sleep every night with stress about money in their mind? Worry, fear, scarcity. And these emotions become patterns, night after night. The same thoughts, the same feelings, reinforcing the same reality. But when you introduce a symbol of abundance, even subtly, something begins to shift. Your mind is no longer surrounded only by fear. There is now a counter signal, a quiet reminder of possibility. Now, this alone is not enough, because one symbol creates awareness. But transformation requires reinforcement, and this is where the second object comes in. Something that represents growth, expansion, opportunity. In many traditions, this is symbolized by something natural, something that grows, like a small plant element, or even something as simple as a seed. Now, why a seed? Because a seed carries a powerful message. It represents potential, something small, that can become something much bigger. Now imagine placing that under your bed. Every night, your subconscious is exposed to the idea of growth, of expansion, of transformation. And over time, that idea becomes part of your thinking. You begin to see opportunities differently. Instead of thinking, this won't work, you start thinking, what if this grows? And that small shift in thinking changes your actions. You take chances, you explore options, you move differently. And again, from the outside, it looks like luck, but from the inside, it's alignment. Now comes the third object, and this is where everything connects, because the first represents flow, the second represents growth, the third represents intention. In many teachings, this is symbolized by something written, a note, a word, a clear statement of what you want. Now this might seem simple, but it is one of the most powerful things you can do, because most people never clearly define what they want. They say, I want more money, I want success, I want a better life. But these are vague, and the subconscious does not respond well to vagueness. It responds to clarity. So when you write something specific and place it under your bed, you are giving direction to your internal world. Now imagine combining all three: flow, growth, intention. Every night, for hours, your subconscious is surrounded by these signals. Not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly, and repetition creates belief. Belief influences behavior. Behavior creates results, and results appear like luck. Now here's something important to understand. This is not about instant results. This is about subtle shifts, because the mind does not change overnight, but it does change with consistent input. Now think about your current patterns, your current thoughts about money, your current beliefs about success. Where did they come from? From repetition, from experience, from environment. So if those patterns were created, they can also be changed. And this is one of the simplest ways to begin that process. not by forcing change, but by influencing it, gently, consistently. Now imagine continuing this practice, night after night, without pressure, without obsession, just quiet consistency. Slowly, your internal resistance begins to fade, your thinking becomes more open, your actions become more aligned, and opportunities that were always there become visible because they were never absent. You were just not aligned to see them. Now, as this understanding deepens, something else begins to happen. You start becoming more aware of your environment. You begin to notice what supports you and what silently holds you back. And once that awareness comes, you gain control, not over luck, but over the conditions that create it. And that changes everything, because once you begin to see how small symbols influence your inner world, a deeper question naturally appears. If something this simple can shift your thinking, then what else has been shaping your life without your awareness? Think about it. Every day, you are surrounded by signals, some visible, some hidden. Objects, words, environments, habits, all quietly repeating messages to your mind. And over time, those messages form beliefs. Beliefs shape decisions. Decisions create outcomes. So what most people call fate is often just a pattern, repeated long enough to feel permanent. Now imagine interrupting that pattern, not with force, not with struggle, but with subtle influence. This is where the true depth of these teachings begins to reveal itself. Because placing objects under your bed is not the real practice. It is the beginning of awareness. The real transformation happens when you understand why it works. And when you understand the why, you begin to apply it to everything. Now let's go deeper into the space itself. The place where you sleep is not just physical. It is psychological. It is where your body releases control, where your mind processes reality, where your subconscious becomes most active. This is why ancient teachings treated this space as sacred, not in a religious sense, but in a functional sense. Now think about how most people treat this space. Cluttered, unorganized, unintentional. And then they wonder why their thoughts feel scattered, why their life feels disorganized. Now imagine cleaning that space, not just physically, but intentionally, removing what doesn't serve you, keeping only what aligns with your direction, and then placing symbols that reinforce what you want to become. This is no longer a random act. This becomes design. And when you begin to design your environment, you begin to design your thinking. Now let's take this even deeper. There is something powerful about what lies beneath you, because what is beneath you represents your foundation, and your foundation determines your stability. If your foundation is weak, everything above it feels unstable. But if your foundation is aligned, everything above it becomes stronger. So when you place symbols beneath you, you are not just placing objects, you are redefining your foundation. Every night, your body rests on top of a foundation. That represents flow, growth, and intention. Now let's talk about resistance, because whenever you try something new, your mind creates doubt. This is too simple. This won't work. This is just imagination. And in a way, that's true, because imagination is the starting point of every reality. Everything you see around you today was once just an idea. And what made it real was belief, followed by action. Now here's the important part. These practices are not meant to replace action. They are meant to support it, because without action, nothing changes. But without alignment, action becomes inconsistent. But when your subconscious begins to align, something shifts. Your actions become more natural, more consistent, more confident. Now let's explore something even deeper. Gratitude. One of the most overlooked aspects of these teachings. But when you combine symbols with gratitude, something powerful happens. Your mind shifts from scarcity to appreciation. Now let's connect everything. You have your environment, you have your symbols, you have your intention. Luck is not something you find, it is something you create. By aligning your thoughts, your environment, and your actions, that is the real transformation. and it begins with something as simple as awareness. And once awareness begins to grow, something subtle yet powerful starts to change. You no longer see your life as something happening to you. You begin to see it as something being shaped, quietly, from within. Because when you understand influence, you stop depending on chance, and you start creating direction. Now let's take this even deeper, because placing these symbols is only the surface. The real shift begins when your identity starts to change. Not who you pretend to be, but who you naturally become. Think about this for a moment. Every person who experiences consistent success, or what people call luck, operates from a certain internal identity. They don't just act differently, they think differently, they expect differently. And those expectations guide their behavior. Now imagine gradually becoming someone who expects opportunities, who expects growth, who expects movement in their life. Not in an arrogant way, but in a natural, calm, grounded way. That expectation alone changes how you walk into situations. It changes how you respond to challenges. It changes what you notice. Because your mind is always filtering reality, it shows you what aligns with your internal beliefs and hides what doesn't. So if your belief is, there are no opportunities for me, your mind will prove that to you. But if your belief begins to shift toward, opportunities exist and I am ready for them, your awareness changes. You begin to notice things you previously ignored. Conversations, ideas, connections, and suddenly, your environment hasn't changed, but your perception has. And perception is everything. Now, this is where many people misunderstand these teachings. They think the objects create results, but the objects are not the cause. They are triggers. They initiate a shift, a reminder, a signal. But the real power is always within you. Now let's talk about alignment in action. Because once your thinking begins to shift, your actions follow naturally. You take steps you once delayed. You speak when you once stayed silent. You explore options you once ignored. And these small changes start creating different outcomes. Now imagine this happening consistently. Day after day, your actions become slightly more aligned. Your decisions become slightly more intentional. And over time, those slight changes compound. They build momentum, and momentum is what most people mistake for luck. Now let's go even deeper into something very important: attachment. Because many people approach these practices with one hidden problem. They become attached to the result. They expect something specific, a sudden gain, a specific outcome, a fixed timeline, and when it doesn't happen exactly as expected, they lose belief. But here's the truth. Attachment creates tension. And tension disrupts alignment, because when you are attached, you are focused on lack, on what is not yet there. But when you are detached, calm, open, you allow things to unfold naturally. And this state is where real alignment happens. Now think about it. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you stop chasing something, it appears? Not by accident, but because your internal resistance drops. And when resistance drops, flow begins. This is why these teachings emphasize simplicity. No pressure, no force, just quiet, consistent action. Now let's explore one more powerful layer: your daily awareness. Because what you do during the day reinforces what happens at night. If your day is filled with negativity, doubt, fear, then even the strongest symbols have limited impact. But if your day includes small moments of awareness, gratitude for what exists, openness to possibilities, willingness to act, then everything begins to align. Your day supports your night supports your day, and this creates a continuous cycle, a loop of reinforcement. Now imagine living inside that loop. Every day, you are slightly more aware. Every night, your subconscious is slightly more aligned. And over time, that slight difference becomes significant. Now here's something very important to understand. Transformation rarely feels dramatic. It feels gradual. So gradual that you may not even notice it at first. But one day, you look back and you realize you think differently. You act differently. Your life feels different. And that's when you understand. It was never about one big moment. It was about many small moments, aligned in the same direction. Now let's bring this into something practical. Imagine going to sleep each night, knowing that your environment is supporting you, that your subconscious is being guided, not randomly, but intentionally, and waking up each day with a slightly clearer mind, a slightly stronger sense of direction, a slightly greater openness to opportunity. This is not fantasy. This is the natural result of consistent alignment. Now think about where you are right now, your current patterns, your current thoughts, your current results, and ask yourself honestly, are they aligned with the life you want? If not, then something needs to shift, not dramatically, but intentionally. And sometimes, that shift begins with something very simple, a small action, repeated consistently, with awareness. Because in the end, it's not the size of the action that matters. It's the direction it creates. And once your direction changes, everything else begins to follow.
And when direction begins to change, even in the smallest way, something remarkable starts to unfold. You begin to trust the process, not because you see instant results, but because you feel a subtle shift within yourself, a quiet confidence, a sense of calm. And this is where everything truly comes together, because real transformation is not loud. It doesn't arrive suddenly with dramatic signs.
It builds quietly, through consistent alignment. Now imagine this journey continuing, night after night. You create a space that supports you, a foundation that reflects flow, growth, and clear intention. Day after day, you begin to think differently. You respond differently. You notice differently. And these small internal changes start shaping your external world. Now here's something most people never realize. The moment your internal state changes, your relationship with opportunity changes. Before, you may have ignored chances, doubted yourself, hesitated. But now, you begin to move with more certainty. Not because everything is guaranteed, but because your mindset is aligned. And alignment creates momentum. Now let's explore something even deeper. Self-worth. Because at the core of everything is how you see yourself. If deep down, you don't believe you deserve success, abundance, opportunity, then no external practice can fully override that. But when you begin to align your environment, your thoughts, your actions, your sense of self begins to shift. You start to feel more capable, more open, more deserving. And this internal shift changes everything. Because you no longer reject opportunities subconsciously. You allow them, you step into them, you act on them. And again, from the outside, it looks like luck. But from within, it is alignment meeting action. Now think about the simplicity of this entire approach. No complicated systems, no overwhelming routines, just small, intentional changes, a few meaningful symbols, a clear direction, consistent awareness, and yet, the impact can be profound, because simplicity, when applied consistently, becomes powerful. Now imagine someone who ignores all of this. Their environment remains random, their thoughts remain unchanged, their actions remain inconsistent, and over time, their results remain the same, not because they are unlucky, but because nothing within them has shifted. Now imagine the opposite. Someone who begins to align their environment, who becomes aware of their patterns, who introduces small, consistent changes, who remains patient and detached, allowing the process to unfold naturally. Over time, their life begins to reflect that alignment. More opportunities appear, better decisions are made, greater confidence develops, and slowly, their reality transforms. Now here's the most important realization. These objects, these symbols, this practice, is not about attracting something external. It is about awakening something internal, because everything you seek requires a version of you that is ready to receive it. And this process helps you become that version. Now imagine reaching a point where you no longer question whether things will work, because you trust your alignment, you trust your awareness, you trust your ability to act. This is where real power lies, not in hoping for luck, but in becoming someone who creates the conditions for it. Now take a moment to reflect. What if nothing in your life is truly random? What if every result is connected to patterns that can be shifted? And what if the smallest intentional change could begin that shift? Because often, we search for complex solutions, while the real answer is simple, quiet, consistent. Now, as this understanding settles within you, something becomes clear. You don't need to control everything. You don't need to force outcomes. You only need to align yourself with the direction you want to move,
and allow your actions to follow naturally. Because when your mind, environment, and intention are aligned, life begins to respond differently. Not instantly, but steadily. And that steady change is what creates lasting transformation. Now imagine looking back months from now, noticing how your thinking has evolved, how your actions have improved, how your opportunities have expanded,
and realizing it all began with something simple, a small act of awareness, a quiet decision to change your environment, your thinking, your direction. And that decision created a ripple effect, one that continued to grow until your life itself began to reflect it. Because in the end, it is never about the object. It is about what the object represents and how consistently you allow that meaning to influence your mind, your actions, and your reality. This is the essence of these teachings, not mystery, not superstition, but awareness, alignment, consistency. And when these come together, what once felt out of reach begins to move closer, not by chance, but by design. And that is the true transformation, a life that no longer feels random, but intentional. A path that no longer feels uncertain, but guided. And a version of yourself that no longer waits for luck, but quietly creates it.